Hello, I'm Jay, owner of Volunteer Audio in Oliver Springs, Tennessee. I'm making a series of videos to show you step-by-step how to remove the terrible audio system in your 2024 Harley Davidson Roadglide and upgrade it to one of the Hertz Stage 2 or Stage 4 kits from Volunteer Audio. This uses our latest A2B interface, removing the factory amp and putting a really large 1,000-watt RMS Hertz amp in place. That's going to give you the ability to run up to 8 speakers. In this series, we're going to cover the first 4. We'll add more later as more parts come out. So let's go over to the table. I'll quickly show you what we're going to be putting in the bike, and then we'll get to the bike and get it tore down. All right, first off, we're going to take out those factory 5¼ inch speakers. They're the same terrible ones they've been using since 2014. We're going to upgrade it to a set of Hertz SX165 Neo true 6.5 inch speakers. They're going to handle this crazy amount of power that we're going to throw at them, but they're crystal clear and clean, and they have a great full sound. To power it, we're going to use our newest interface. This was made in conjunction with Volunteer Audio in Siren HD. It's an A2B interface to remove the stock amp completely. It allows us to put our big Hertz SP4.900 in the fairing without any modification or cutting. No warranties are going to be voided. It's going to be completely pre-tuned. The interface has a 31-band DSP in it, so everything about the radio is going to continue to work. The DSP is perfectly tuned to the bike and the speakers. We do all of that at Volunteer Audio before it ships, so it'll be a very simple install. You'll see that as we go along. The amplifier as well will be completely pre-tuned, and it's all plug and play. The factory amp did about 9 watts per channel when we dynoed it. This amplifier does 190 per channel at 4 ohm. We've dynoed the factory amp at 2 ohm. If we had 2 ohm speakers or 4 speakers on the same front or rear channels, you'd be getting 290 watts continuous power. But even at our lowest point, we're still about 19 to 20 times the power of the stock amp. That's going to make it crystal clear, clean, and loud at highway speed, so you can hear your music no matter how fast you're going. Now, if you decide to add rear speakers, whether that be through replacing the factory lids, or maybe we're 45, 60 days into the future from this video and our Hertz cutting kits are out, I'm also going to cover how to pin the rear wiring. So Harley ran rear speaker wiring to under your seat. I'll show you a connector. We're using at Volunteer Audio to tap that, and how that you're going to pin that. It's a very easy process and saves you a lot of money over going back to Harley and buying their rear wiring. They are outrageous. But in this video series, I'm going to show you this time how to take your factory non-speaker lids and install the factory painted speaker lids. And we're going to use the Hertz SX690Hs. We're also going to be installing our rear speaker harness. I'll show you how to do all that perfectly and clean. So this will make this whole process very easy. Let's get to the bike. Let's get it tore apart. Let's put an awesome sound system in it. All right, so before we start tearing our bike apart, one of the first things you need to do on the new bikes is we actually have to turn the ignition switch on, get access to our side panel, and pull that 60 amp factory fuse, and then turn our ignition back off. That's going to keep us from storing any weird fault codes, from having things unplugged or apart, because this computer doesn't immediately go to sleep, so it could store some faults that you would then have to erase. If that happens and you get those codes, no big deal, give us a call. Check out our YouTube channel. We've already done a video on how to access the diagnostics through the radio and how to go through and clear each one of those modules. One key thing is, if you're to that point and you end up having to do that, say you left something unplugged, you had a light come on, you figured it out, you plug it back in, go in and erase the codes in every single module through the radio. Sometimes you need to erase them in modules that do not show a code. So it'll be 0 on codes, but there's a pending in the background you can't see. So if you clear each module, you're sure to have those lights turn out. All right, so first step, like I said, we're going to actually turn the ignition on. We're going to take our side bag loose so we can lean it out enough to remove our side fuse panel cover. I'm actually just going to take it all the way off, set it here on the floor. Now you're just going to grab this cover and just pull out on it. It's just pressure fit. And up here at the top, there's a little plastic rubber boot. Pull it off and pull this 60 amp fuse. All right, so at that point, our bike is completely powered down. Turn your ignition switch back off. And the last step at the very end will be putting this back in. All right, so first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna start taking our fairing apart. Now on a Roadglide, it's really nice. You don't actually have to pull the speaker pods to do the speakers, but we are gonna pull the grills. Then we're gonna pull all the hardware to pull the outer fairing shell off, and then we'll change our speakers. You're going to need a T25 or T27 Torx driver. A T25 is going to tackle every bolt we're doing with one tool, so we're going to start with it. So first thing you want to do is protect your front fender. Put some sort of a protective cover over it. If you do not have a fender protector like we have, lay a really thick towel or something on it. It's very easy to dent the fender if you were to accidentally drop a tool or something on it. So we're going to start at our windshield. There's 4 bolts holding it on. So let's remove each one of these with our T25 Torx. Each one of these has a little rubber retainer, so you want to make sure and keep that rubber retainer with your screws. We're going to take these 4 out. You're going to be amazed at just how easy this whole system goes in. It's been very, very well thought out, well engineered. It's a pretty simple process. Now, this is the factory windshield. I know there's a couple aftermarket options out there that have slightly different hardware, so you may have a different tool if you have one of those. But we're going to take all of our bolts, we're going to put them in this container over here. It's going to keep them all organized, and when all the bolts are back in, we'll know that we're back together. So we're going to pull our windshield out. It just slid right out of these 2 little hooks. We're going to set it over to the side for now. All right, so now we're going to come to the front of this big piece of plastic trim. I want you just to grab a hold of this piece of trim and pull towards you. By doing so, it's going to unlock a couple clips on each end. We're just going to pull it off, set it aside. All we did was pull these 2 push clips loose. All right, so using the same tool, we're going to remove 3 Torx-headed screws that we now see behind the windshield on each side. I'm just going to take them loose and leave them in this piece of plastic because I'm going to set it all together to the side. So once you get the 3rd one loose, you should be able to just grab it and set it over. All right, so now that we have those out, we can now just lift this piece of plastic, remove it. It was actually behind the windshield before. Stick it behind there on our table. So, next step, we're going to be removing our upper speaker grills. So these speaker grills are very delicate and they're easy to break. There's 2 clips at the bottom that just lip over. So I don't want you to pull at the bottom at all. I want you to come up to the top, and I'm going to actually be pushing in on the bottom while I pull out at the top. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to work my way around here, and I'm going to pull the 2nd clip loose. So there's your 2 clips. The bottom are these 2 little plastic lip. They're so easy to break. You just got to be really careful not to pull out on the bottom. Same thing on the other side. I'm going to be pushing in on the bottom while I pull out on the top. Just kind of snapping these loose. Work your way around. No special tools needed here. All right, I'll set it over to the side as well. Eventually we'll have replacement grills. I know Hertz is working on them. When they come out, we'll be putting new grills on at the end, but in this case, they're not out yet, so we'll be going back with those stock grills. Let's take your T25. I wanted you to go to this bottom Torx screw. So there's 2 on each side of your fairing. We're not removing the top one, only the bottom one. I want you to go and take it out. Same thing on the other side. All right, now right behind those speaker grills that we just removed, you'll see there's another Torx screw on each side. Let's take those out. Now keep up with the look of these and where they came from, because we want to put the same screws back in the same place. We've got 2 more at the top of our outer fairing that look just like the ones we just removed from our speaker grill area. All right, there are only 2 screws left holding the fairing on. So now you've got to keep a little pressure on the fairing so it doesn't fall off, and remove these 2 that are going straight down on each side of this factory air vent. All right, so now that you have both of those out, just grab your fairing, just kind of pull it backwards and set it over to the side. All right, so the next step we're going to do, just to make it easier to run a little bit of wiring, we are putting a bigger amp. It's going to require a larger power and ground wire running from the battery up. We're going to go ahead and take out our headlight. So the headlight's held in with 6 Torx screws. They're actually a little bit bigger. As you notice, they're a little loose on my T25. A T27 is going to fit it relatively tight, but they're not so tight that you can't just use your T25 to take them out. I'm just going to break each one of them loose, and then I'm going to start taking them out. There's 2 at the base of the headlight. Make sure you're getting the ones that go through the headlight bracket, because there's a couple just like it that go through a metal frame next to it. So 6 bolts, all the same length, the same size. We'll put them in a little tray together so we put the right ones back in at the end. They're going to look very similar to the ones that are in the amplifier. And we're not going to be reusing those, so we'll just be taking the amp out. And we'll have those left over at the end. This headlight's pretty large. It's also pretty heavy. So once you get where you're down to like 1 bolt left, you want to start holding up on the weight of that headlight. All right, so now I've got my headlight loose. Just gonna let it slide forward. And as it comes out, you're gonna see you have a headlight connector, just a plug. There's a push clip. You push up to release it. That push is right on the top there. So let me give you a better view of that connector. So all I did was it's mounted like this, but what you're doing is you're pushing in here. By pushing in, it lifts this tab inside and allows it to unplug. So set your headlight to the side, retain that hardware to go back in later. All right, so let's move to our speakers. So let's see what it takes to get those out. Again, we haven't even changed tools yet. We're still with our T25. Same tool is going to remove the 4 screws out of the surround of our speaker. And on a Roadglide, it's nice because we don't have to pull the pods to get to them. And as long as we're going back in with neodymium drivers, which is a rare earth magnet, so it's not real big on the back, you can put your new speaker in without having to pull these pods. So as you take your speaker out, I want you to kind of look at these terminals. You'll notice there's a clear one that's slightly smaller and a large black one. The black one is the negative. We're just going to unplug it and then do the same thing with the clear one. That's important when we go back together that we put the black one on the negative and the clear on the positive when we put our Hertz speaker in here in a minute. Same thing. Black is the negative and the clear one's the positive. So unplug those and set the speaker to the side. All right, so let's do a little speaker comparison real quick. If you'll notice, we have quite a bit more cone surface area with this 6.5 versus this 5.25. We also have a much better tweeter. It's going to be a little brighter, a lot clearer, and it's going to sound amazing with this amp and our DSP perfectly tuned for the bike. Now on the back side, you'll notice we have this tiny little magnet. It's actually very weak. It doesn't pick up any metal. Magnets are important because that magnetic field and how strong it is what gives control to the speaker. And electricity passing through a copper coil in the middle of it is what makes it move. So when that is stronger, you handle more power, you have a better speaker. The Hertz speaker uses a rare earth neodymium magnet. It's about 40 times stronger than a traditional magnet. Doesn't have to be big to be very strong and give us a really, really good speaker. And this speaker is going to be 3-year warranted, even against blowing. But you'll see at the end, we get done, we'll let you hear the system. We're also going to be doing a full video, doing a walk away and some riding footage on this bike. It'll be a separate video. You need to check it out because it's amazing what it sounds like. But the speaker's going in, this one's going in the trash. All right, one of the first things I want you to do is grab a pair of pliers, go to your speaker terminals, and I want you to just take the end and squeeze them just a little bit just to make them tighter because we don't want them to fall off of our new speakers and have to come in here and work on these again. So I'll just squeeze both sets. Just so we have a good connection on our new speakers. Now the Hertz speakers are going to have slightly different terminals. They're going to have a bigger positive and a smaller negative on each side. We're not using those. We're going to go on these two toward the back. And the negative is the one with the straight line. The plus is going to be this one that looks like a cross. And I want you to take the clear one and go on the plus and slide that on. You'll notice it's on there good and tight. Now the larger one is going to go here on the negative. We're going to push it on. We're going to make sure it doesn't easily come off. If it doesn't, we're good to go. If it isn't tight, we're going to tighten it up a little bit more with our pliers. Now we're going to take our speaker. We're going to kind of bring the top in first, and we're going to drop it in here and rotate it around to our holes line up. The Hertz speakers are a direct replacement all the way down to having a clearance for this little plastic nipple that sticks out. It's going to stick through this bottom hole when everything's aligned. So using the same factory screws we just removed, we're going to start putting our speaker in. All right, let's do the same thing on the other side. All right, so again, taking the black one, putting it on the negative, and the clear one on the positive. Bringing the top in first so that it slides in. Just kind of drop it into place, rotate it till everything lines up. All right, so both front speakers are in. All right, we're going to jump back to the fairing, and we're just going to remove the factory amplifier. This is an easy process. We're just going to remove the 4 bolts that are holding it down. We'll break them all loose. I'm going to push this little red clip out. So you're going to slide it outward, push down on this black retainer so that it will release and unplug. and then slide that out. All right, so now that it's loose, I'm going to go ahead and finish unbolting the amp. There's not a lot of room there to slide that plug out until the amp is loose. All right, so now that we have our amp unbolted, I'm just going to finish unplugging it. We're going to set it over to the side. You're not going to be reusing these 4 bolts. All right, so our amp is going to go in here. It's going to fit really nice, but the next step, we're going to move to the back. We're going to remove our seat, then we're going to remove our gas tank, and then we're going to route some wiring from up here back to the battery. All right, so far you've needed 1 tool, and we're going to keep on that for just a little while longer, but there will be another one here as we move on. So we're going to open up one of our back bags. Now this is a bike that already had rear speakers we put in. I'll be putting this back to stock. You'll see that later in the video, and we'll show you how we got to this point. But for now, I'm going to be removing this T25 from this leather strap so our seat can come off. We'll go over all this rear wiring later on in the video series. Remove the same bolt from the back of the seat, and then just slide your seat back and remove it. All right, so we're at the point we're going to need another tool. We just need a 13mm socket and a wrench. I'm going to use a Milwaukee battery ratchet. It makes my life a little easier. Starting back here under the seat, I want you to take this this vent line. I've seen some of them actually run through here, and some of them have been on the outside. Most are on the outside. Just unplug this vent like that from back here now, and then we're going to go ahead and take out these 2 rear tank bolts. All right, so next we're going to disconnect our fuel line. It's under here. I'm just going to take a paper towel and put under it. We're going to slide up on this silver sleeve. When we do that, the fuel line is going to disconnect. And this is a really nice setup because as this comes down, it also shuts off the fuel tank. So you're not going to have a leak. Just get a couple drops when you unplug it. That's why I got that paper towel. So that's undone. We have one more connector. So you'll see there's a wire that leaves the tank right next to it. And if you follow it over, you'll see there's one more plug under here that we've got to press and unplug. So here's that plug, same idea. We just push up on the black tab, it releases it, and we unplug it. All right, we're going to move to the front of our gas tank now. While you're down here, check out, there's some covers. They're just little rubber covers that you're just going to grab and pull off. These little plastic covers hide the front bolts on each side. So take this off on each side, and then go ahead and remove that bolt. All right, so one more thing while we're here. This is a little hard to see. You'll see there are 2 vent lines coming out of the top of the gas tank. One has a clamp, leave it alone, but pull the one that does not have a clamp and disconnect it. All right, so also remove that rubber cap on this side and undo the front bolt. All right, so it's always best to do this with a gas tank that's not full. Our gas tank is relatively empty. That's going to make it a lot easier because Harley ran a new vent line, unlike they did on other bikes. You actually have to lift up on the tank, and there's a couple clips on the side that we've got to release this vent line from. I'll show you here in a second what I'm doing once I get the tank out of the way to show you. All right, so I just released them. Like I say, while it is, it's much easier when the tank is low. Now I'm going to set this tank over while we continue to work. All right, so this is that line that I was unclipping from the frame. Let's go over to the frame and I'll show you where it snapped in. You'll see these 2 little plastic retainers. All I did was just pull up and slide that down. I just did that with my hand from under the tank, and we'll put that back in at the end. All right, so ignore this wire because I've already ran it. We'll show you later how it got here and how we did that, but we're going to work a little bit underneath the battery tray. I want you to unplug the main connector that's going here to the back. Now later I'll show you how to actually pin this. There's actually speaker wires already on this side that don't go to this side, and I'll show you how to add those. We're going to take our 2 heated gear connectors, unplug those and lay them to the side, slide out this factory connector, this accessory connector, and slide out your antenna here that goes to your keys. Now from the front, there'll be a clip that you're just going to release, and that's going to take this piece of plastic that's held to this wire. It's going to allow you just to put it over to the side. Now the first step we did was we turned the ignition on and we pulled the main fuse out of the side panel. We did that because on this particular Harley, this box is no longer the ECM, it's the BCM. And inside of it is a sensor that if you lift this up and it's got power, it thinks that you laid your bike on its side, especially if you turn the ignition on while it's up. But we have to take it off to get to the battery. So once you pull that fuse, no risk of it thinking that you've wrecked your bike, no reason to make a trip to the dealer or reset any codes. So we're going to lean this over to the side, and that's going to give us access to the bolt we're looking for. It's a T30, I'm sorry, T27. We're going to use a T25 to take it loose. Now you'll notice I've already got a lithium titanate battery in this bike. The battery from the factory is very weak, and we do a lot of demoing, so we went ahead and upgraded the battery. I did a previous video showing you how to do that. All right, so now we are to our battery, and the reason we just got here was for a couple reasons. One's going to be able to show you how to run your rear speaker wiring up. Secondly, we've got to connect a power and ground connector here that's going to run up to our new amp. All right, so on your power and ground connector, you're going to see a red and a black wire. The red one's going to have a big fuse holder in it. Make sure the red one goes on the positive terminal of the battery. So we're going to take our Phillips screwdriver, loosen up our positive terminal. I'm going to put our bolt through our ring on our new wiring, start it back in our battery. This battery has some accessory terminals on it, but these easily stack on the front, so no need to use those accessory terminals for this part of the install. Same thing on the negative side. Let's remove that bolt. Now we're going to take the black wire, put our screw through it, go on there. All right, so now that both of those are on there, I'm going to give just a little bit of lead. I'm going to put this fuse holder down here in front of the battery. I'm going to add a little bit of wiring down in here as well, and we're just going to bring this up and just kind of leave it over, and we're going to put our cover back onto our battery area. So just like before, I'm just going to slide this piece of plastic back in, lower it back down, and put that T27 screw back in with our T25 driver. That's going to allow us to start going back together. So we're going to take our BCM, slide it back in. It's got some little plastic, it just loops in here, and a little clip over here that overlaps it. Now that we've done that, let's go ahead and take this cover, slide it back in where it goes, clip it back in the front. Take our accessory connector and slide it back on its correct place here. And our antenna slides in here. That's what picks up your key fob, so we want to make sure it's back in place. And for now, we'll go ahead and plug in this rear harness, because some of you are just doing a 2-speaker system. We're just going to plug that back in. We're going to assume that you're doing 2, and later I'll show you how to do the rear speaker section of this. We're just going to go ahead and clip each one of our heated gear plugs back in as well. So under here is back together. Now, we took the gas tank off because we need to route this to the front. This particular cover is what we call our backbone of the bike. This is a portion of the frame that all the factory wiring runs in. From the factory, there were a couple zip ties that wrapped around it. I cut those previously doing some other videos and some installs, but if you have any plastic zip ties running over this, just cut them and remove them. They're not needed. There's also going to be some strips of what we call Tessa tape. You need to cut that Tessa tape down one side so you can peel that Tessa tape up and over to give access to this cover. So just peel these back and up and over. Also, we've got a couple brake lines here that we're going to take. We're just going to put to the side. We're also going to unloop later out of here. So once we have our Tessa tape cut, our zip ties out of the way, our brake lines to the side, we're going to start unclipping the end of this piece of plastic. It's just these little clips. If you push out, we'll unclip. And then we can kind of wiggle it back and forth, unclipping side after side till we remove the cover. And that exposes that factory wiring. This looks intimidating, but as you see, it's easy. I make it look really easy because I do it a lot, so it may not be quite as easy as it looks, but it's definitely not hard. So we're going to take our wire that we ran. I'm actually going to feed it some on the other side of this wiring. Now we've got plenty of wiring here, some of which we're going to have to leave behind the headlight and the fairing because this is a little longer than we need, but it also works on some other bike models. So we're going to leave, I'd say leave a couple more inches in here because like I say, we've got plenty. And we're going to feed it up the side, inside this backbone, all the way up. As we get to the middle here, we're going to cross over, and I want you coming up the left side of the bike when you exit the top. So now that we have to this point, I'm going to go ahead and put the cover back on our backbone. Starting at the top, I'm just going to line it up so that it clips in. Being mindful that if any of the factory wiring has tried to make its way out of here, that we're also making sure that it's back in along with our new wiring, and any of the tape that we had is still hanging out the side. All right, putting our tape back in place, putting our brake lines back where they went. It's important that our brake lines stay where they're supposed to be. They're still snapped in their holders, still routed appropriately. Yep. All right, so now I'm going to turn my front handlebar to the left, and I'm going to feed some wiring in behind it, but I need it to the left, so I've got a little bit more room in the front to go actually into the fairing location. I'm going to pull my wiring to the front. Now, if you look down in here, there's a plastic cover. This plastic cover, if you will grab it and slide it backwards and pull out, will release and come out to give you access to run this wire. So as we pull this out, it's going to make us a hole. We're going to see where the original wiring, all we're doing is following the factory wiring into the fairing. So once we get this far, I want you to go to the other side. So look down in this hole, find your wiring that we're running. Just grab it with your fingers and help bring it on through the hole. All right, we're working our way through now. Let's pull any excess wiring you have on up into the fairing. All right, so it doesn't take a lot of this to get to where we're going because we're literally going to plug in right here. So now we're going to take the wire we just ran in. Now, I do want to make mention, from the factory, this headlight wiring runs through here, up and over and back down to the headlight. It makes no sense. So the first time I pulled the headlight, I just routed that wiring in behind here. I would tell you to do the same thing. It's a pretty long lead, but it's really simple to just take it and to put part of it behind each side, because it doesn't make sense to run that over our amplifier in any future work or anything you do in the future. It's just going to be hanging over it, and it really plugs in right here. So I'm going to take my amp power wire, and I'm going to do the same thing, though. I'm going to run it through this little gap I have through this bracket. I'm going to bring it around the other side. I didn't get this piece of plastic stuck in a wire here. Let's get it here. I'm just routing this power and ground wire over here, because when I put my headlight back in, I want it to this side, about here. So we're ready for that point actually now. We're going to go back to the other side and put that piece of plastic back where it goes here. Now that we have our wiring in here, we want to take this piece of plastic. We want to make sure it's behind that bolt, but we want to slide it back till it clips back in where it's supposed to go. Now it's clipped back in. That was very easy. And normally I'll take at least one zip tie and zip tie that wire to the factory wiring here. And then we flush cut it. So far, as you see, it's a pretty simple process. Our wiring is now from our battery into our fairing. Let's go ahead and go back together with our gas tank. We'll get it back on. We'll get our seat back on. Actually, I'll leave the seat off. For you guys doing the 4-speaker, I'll leave it off so we can go over that. I'm going to put the gas tank back on next, get a few more bolts back in it, then we'll move back to the fairing. All right, so as you see, I still have this plastic vent line next to the tank. So I'm just going to set my tank back on the backbone. And I'm going to slide it up about where it would be. And then I'm going to lift up, and with my hand, I'm going to reach underneath here, and I'm going to put this vent back where it needs to go. Again, this is something I'm going to make look easy. I was a mechanic for years. I can see with my fingertips, which makes it easy to do things like this. All right, so those are clipped back in place. See, on some bikes I've seen it just left here, which is how this bike was factory. Some people take this and they feed it through a hole here, and they bring it right out into here as well. So you can do it either way. I think it looks better when it's actually ran through the hole and under the seat, because now you don't have any line sticking out through here. Just kind of makes sense that it would go there. But like I say, from the factory, it was actually ran around this side. All right, so that's back in place. I'm going to line up my 4 bolts, and then we'll see about rehooking up the fuel line. All right, so let's start with our front tank bolt. Now I want you to make sure that your vent lines didn't somehow or another work their way out before you put your bolts in, that they're still actually behind this portion here. I'll make sure both of these vent lines are on this side of where the bolts go. All right, and if they are, let's move forward. Let's grab our bolt, lift our tank up just enough that it gets back in the hole, and get it started. Just gonna start it. I'm not gonna tighten it up yet. Let's move to the other side and do the same thing. All right, to the back of our tank. Once you have these started, go ahead and tighten them up. We'll tighten both front ones up. And don't forget to take your little rubber caps and put back over the bolts here in a minute when you're done. We'll go ahead and do that now. Now you've got two. They're actually marked on the back side, LH and RH for left hand and right hand. This is our left one. I'll put it on this side. And just for a close-up on how this works, it's just a rubber that just kind of spreads out and goes around that little piece of metal there. All right, let's go ahead and plug up our vent line in the front of our tank. Just going to take that plastic line that we had, and we're just going to plug it right back in. Just pressure fitting that back where it goes. Now let's go underneath and let's plug our ascending unit back up. All right, so we're going to take this plug. We're going to leave that clip pointed downward. Just going to feed it up underneath the gas tank and plug it back into this factory spot. It's a little hard to see. Let's get down where you've got a good visual of it. This being a base model, it doesn't have a chin spoiler. The chin spoiler would make it a little harder to see. Just making sure we get it lined up straight. Plugged in. Now our fuel line, just get it where it's right below the hole, but push down on that silver. I'm sorry, push up on the silver, push up on the line, and then just kind of push it up until that silver sleeve comes back down. There it goes. It just clicked in. Our fuel line's back on. Gas tank's back on. Let's move to the fairing. All right, so I've got 6 bolts for my headlight, but I went ahead and put the top 2 outer ones that are easy to get to back in. I'm going to plug my headlight in. Now, being mindful of this wire, I'm just going to hold it up as I start sliding my headlight back in where it goes. Now let's start both of these bolts. Just starting all of them before we tighten any of them up. All right, remember 6 bolts, get them all tight. And that's the last one. All right, so now we got a couple things. I'm about 45 to 60 days out from the actual amp mounting plates to be available. Now, we should have one eventually that'll come with hardware that it'll just bolt in where the factory amp did, and then it'll be 4 screws that hold the amp down. Now, for the last 4 or 5 years, we've been using the same amp in the fairing on motorcycles, held in with a piece of Velcro. It has worked fine, but I want to do something a little better than that later on. So for now, we're going to Velcro the amp into a position in here, and I'll show you. It's a big flat piece of metal, no problem. Well, let's talk about one other thing. If you had a CVO, or if you just added the garage door opener already to your base model, there's a connector in the fairing for a garage door opener. Normally mounted on a plastic plate right here. You don't need to mount it there. You can unsnap it from there. There's a large cavity right behind the headlight here, and if you relocate it and put it there, you're not going to void any warranties. The range is still great on the garage door opener. It's just not up here where we need to put our new A2B interface on the particularly these Roadglides. So if you have it, unbolt it, put it behind the headlight. It's going to work great, and it's going to give you the same look we have here. If you got a base model without the garage door opener or the home link, you don't have to worry about it at all because it's not in your bike. So we just took our original amp connector and we've got it up here about where it was originally. We've pulled just a little bit of excess to get us a little bit of room to come to the front of the amp here. All right, so here's our amplifier. It's completely preset with a cap on the end. No need to remove that to do any adjustments. If you do, you're only going to mess it up. All right, so all you do is remove that little clear plastic off the back of the Velcro. Now look inside here and you'll see this lip sticks up here on either side, and this amp fits right between there. So what I want you to do is I want you to stick your amp right between those 2 locations. You're going to feed your wiring under this end, and we're going to slide it all the way against the back of the radio, but where we're clearing that, and then we're going to stick it down. So again, you'll see the feet fit right between that distance. This is as big an amp as we could fit, and it's fit like this. All right, so what's great is all the wiring is the proper length for the install we're doing. So next we're just going to plug in our factory amp connector. Push your little red clip back in. And we got a couple things. So depending on when you're watching this, when you've made your purchase, or if you just decide to get it later, we've got a couple options. First one is going to be this bracket. We're waiting on production of this. This is our 3D printed version. It just slides in here, bolts in, and once it's bolted in, you're going to see that your interface will bolt right to it. This will be available later if you didn't get it now. You can add it later if you want, because it's going to bolt in. It looks really nice once it's in, but in this video, I want to show you how we do it if we don't have that yet, because there's no need to showing you a bracket you didn't get in your kit. So we're going to take a little isopropyl alcohol. We're going to clean an area right here at the top, and we're just going to Velcro it right here at the top of our headlight, just right to the side. Now, there's a ton of room here behind the fairing. You actually have a vent that comes down, which makes us put it down here, but you actually have a lot of fairing that goes over here. It's a big open void. It's a great area to put something like this. Also, we're going to have our power connector here. We're just going to match it up, yellow to yellow and black to black, and plug it in. And actually at this point, our system is actually installed. It's actually would work right now, but we're going to do just a little bit of wire management. Slide my amp back just a little bit further. The good thing about the Velcro, if you get it off just a little bit, you can just pry it up and slide it just a little bit further back. I'm just using a tool to break the Velcro apart from each other. I'm just doing that to get a little bit more room here in the front. You notice this radio slopes, so as you go backwards, you can get it in a little bit further, and the further back you get it, it's going to give you some more room for wiring here in the front. Good deal. That's all the way back, because this wire is going to stand up just like this, slide right behind that bracket. On this side, we're actually going to take this choke on this wiring and we're going to feed it toward the front. And then we're going to come back down with our wiring. Just a little bit of finesse and just wiggling this the right way. So our wires come back up to the front. A little bit of room here if we get the speaker connector lifted up to fit them on the end underneath. There we go. So our power wire just went under the speaker connector. That made room for this one. And it also makes room for our RCAs to fit right here. Now, any excess power wire you have, you're just going to push back on top of the headlight. And we're going to take one zip tie and we're going to put a connection right here. So now we're just going to take a zip tie. We're going to run it around this factory speaker wire connector. I'm going to go around all these RCA connections, and I'm going to bring it here, and I'm just going to kind of leave it loose till we get this in our final place, and then we'll cinch it down. So if you did not get that bracket, we're going to grab some alcohol. We're just going to clean this front edge to make sure this sticks well. So this bike is pretty well new. It's very, very clean. We're just going to make sure we have a really clean spot here for this to stick. And then you're going to wait and see that alcohol actually dries. All right, so I want you to test fit where you're going to put it first. And I would tell you just go just a little over from this so it's not in your way. You see that little piece? I want you just to unpeel the back of your Velcro, bring it in this far, and just touch it down, just like that. Now that we have that done, we're going to bring our wiring. We're going to set it in where we wanted it to stay. I'm going to tighten that zip tie down. All right, very, very simple install. One plug-in, power and ground, stick your A2B interface there. Now all I'm going to do is put the fairing back on. We'll walk through that process. If you did a 2-speaker install, at the end of the fairing going on, you're finished with the exception of putting the seat back on. But if you're thinking about doing 4 speakers, or maybe you did 2-speaker and you just want to see what it involves, keep watching as we get to the back. I'll show you how to add the rear wiring. And remember, this amplifier will run up to 8 speakers. You can do upper fairing, lower fairing. Yeah, there's some chopped lowers out there that go on these chop bars. Tour pack speakers or lid speakers. And if you have tour pack speakers, we'll be making some videos really soon showing how that adds on. And the same wiring we put in for our lids works for that. So you might want to just continue watching anyways. All right, so now I've grabbed the 2 bolts. The last ones we took out of the fairing are the first ones that are going to go in. I'm going to take my fairing and do the same thing. Just kind of slide it back up here in place, right on front. Now I want you to look at a couple things. On this side, you'll see these little lips. Can you see that? They're going to feed in on each side. So we're going to get close, we're going to push them in, and we're going to slide it forward. We're also going to check right down in here and make sure that we don't have our fairing sticking up over this plastic. There's some lips there. And we're going to go to the other side and make sure those same pieces are slid into place where they go there. Now here's what I'm talking about. See these little connectors here? They have to actually go under this edge. If they don't go under it, it won't feed forward where it's supposed to go. So we've got to do that on both sides. It's just a hair tricky, but once you have it lined up, you can start both of these bolts right back down, and it's going to hold it in place while you do the rest. Now don't tighten these yet. I just kind of start them, because I know it's important that we get things started before we tighten it down, or something's going to be stuck out of place. There we go. It's had a little clip, not wanting to go where it was supposed to go. All right, so we just start those to hold them in place. Now I'm going to look at my headlight, just make sure everything is lined up where it's supposed to be. Looks good. Make sure my sides are behind, which this one is not yet. So I'm going to push it a little toward the front, push it in so it'll go into these clips. All right. That is good. Now, once we know one side's good, take your bolt and put it at the top of the fairing. And then that just kind of pulls that side in, kind of locks it there while you go around to the other side. So I'll check the same thing over here, make sure that all of these little clips went in where they're supposed to go. And I'll put my top one in here. All right, so everything is lined up well in here as well. There's a couple little clips that can get out of the way. Now I want to go to my speaker side, put the 2 in at the speakers. That's going to pull this in place. We're going tight with it. Same T25. I mean, we've really used 3 tools, Phillips screwdriver, T25, and a 13 millimeter. It's been a very, very easy install. Make sure I tighten the top ones. These are the ones that go straight down. Another thing, if you forget these 2 out, which you don't want to do, they're a hole right into the speaker pod. So you'll have a whistle that you can't figure out why if you don't put those back in. So now we've got our 2 longer bolts that went at the bottom of each side. Let's put those back in place. As long as your little sides lined up, these start back very, very easily. So now we're going to move back up to the top. We're going to grab our plastic trim pieces. Had one of these windshield clips pop out. Make sure they stay in there. Well, there goes the other one. Not held in by much. All right, so we're just going to slide these down into this clip and drop it in place. Let's go ahead and grab our front piece. Now I'll tell you, this part is the part I normally see people put on wrong. It's very easy to put on right, but there's 2 little clips. They just have to fit right over this lip. If you get them off, it's going to be hanging down and not in the right place. So just going to get it lined up, push it back in while lining all of those up. That's back in. Looks good. We're just going to take each one of these pieces and put them back where they went and start their bolts. And we just left all 3 bolts sitting in them. All right, easy enough, those are on. I'm going to grab our windshield and we're just going to slide it back down into those hooks where it holds it, pressing it in, and we'll put our 4 side screws in. Each one of these have that little rubber insert. Now, something I noticed a while back, when you look at these factory windshields, you may think there's some little cracks coming out from these holes. It's actually just mold marks. They're not actually cracked. And the way these bolts are designed, they've got a little rubber insert, and they tighten until they bottom out, and it's not enough to crack the windshield. That was an issue with some of the older bikes, seeing people over tighten them and crack that glass around the bolts. All right, if you're just a 2-speaker bike, you need to skip on to the end. And what we're going to do is we're just going to take the bag loose, take the fuse panel off, or the fuse cover off, put our fuse back in. Then we'll go into setup, but I'll have that in a later video. You can skip the rear speaker videos and go to there. So we're going to move on to our rear speakers next, but let's first go ahead and put our front speaker grills back in place. I was going to leave them off and show it to you playing, but we might as well. There's no reason to have to see those. Just like before, putting the bottom in first so that those little plastic clips lip over, lining up, and just pushing into each one of these clips. Very, very simple install. All right, so at this point, we've got the whole front back together. Again, if you're a 2-speaker, take your bag loose, put your fuse back into fuse panel, put your seat back on, and you're done. If you want to see those steps, just move on to the end of the video, and we'll move into the back speakers now.